Thanks. So to my knowledge, I think this is the first U.S. North America-based biotech conference to offer a dedicated Japan-Korea panel. So I think even though it's a little bit small today, the audience size is small, so we can be very intimate. That's the advantage. So I think it's a testament to the fact that there has been very major change in how biotech business and industry, especially early stage commercialization and venture financing, is taking place in Korea. And I think we'll also talk about Japan, which is very different. So Japan, as you know, has been known, Japanese pharma has been known to make some large global M&A deals and partnership. And compared to that, Japan's early stage commercialization has been relatively not as active compared to Japanese big pharma. And Korea, as you know, has again demonstrated in recent years the strength in manufacturing in biologics and biomanufacturing and biosimilar. And before, people thought that Korea's manufacturing strength was, I guess, mutually exclusive with innovation and discovery. That's before, but today I think that is also changing. So it's something that we are hoping to talk about today. And so myself, I come from pharma and originally a few years ago, and biotech, and I've been investing. I've been making cross-border investments over the last 6-7 years. So we are investing in Korea, U.S. and Canada, and I'll turn over to the panelists. So we have James, Derek, and Wei-Young and Leo, and I like to have each panelist introduce himself, and since everyone's bio is very well described on the brochure, I like to have the opportunity to describe the work that he's doing and the sort of high-level investment strategies that each person is employing, and we'll start from there. So James, you want to?
Yeah, sure. So my name is James Kaiser, and I work for Hoya. They're actually a relatively large company. We have a market cap of about $20 billion. I think I looked today, it was like $19.6 billion, and cash on hand of about $2.7 billion, of which the CEO wants to do MA, which is kind of outside of my sphere, and venture capital investments to help grow the firm. We have been given the impetus to go out and invest, $40 million a year over year. However, if we find more investments, that we tap the corporate funds so that we have no limit to how much we can really go out there and find. However, the deals have to be good, and that probably comes to the strategic problem that we have as a venture capital company coming from Japan. We're extremely risk averse. And we are very, very, very careful as to where we place those types of venture capital investments. And the level of due diligence that I think we do here is probably much, much more scrutinous than anything you see in the United States. We really get out the electron microscope to look over the companies before we would send funds. And because of that, we rarely ever hit our target of $40 million a year. This year, we're probably going to exceed it because we've already invested $20 million into LensGen. Which was announced a few months ago. They're an intraocular lens company. The spaces that we have latitude to invest in are actually very broad within the medical device. We have the mantra of anything eye to GI is kind of the focus of our company strategically. So strategically, we look for anything that's going to correct the visual axis of the patient for ophthalmology. And for GI, we look for any kind of flexible endoscope, any kind of modality that would help in some sort of surgery for that, laparoscopic surgery, any kind of tool that might help diagnostic or therapeutic to help the patient there. However, all of the medical devices that are outside of anything eye to GI, we can invest in more for financial purposes, like a VC, where if it's a good financial opportunity that just happened to come our way, we would do the due diligence and then we would invest expecting an exit to a different strategic, right? We quantify our gain, ROI, just like a regular venture capital. If we were to acquire it, we would just look at our, we buy the firm and then we would look at, how much the firm sold for and our share to calculate the ROI, even though we really were involved for the strategic play of the revenue that we would be gaining on the backside of that investment. So I haven't been doing this very long. I come from a background of research. Everybody on our team comes from a background of engineering, material science, research, because we believe that good investments start with the product and the technology. And then we learned finance, later in life, and as a reason to go through this. We do our investments in North America, Israel, Europe. We have one in Singapore. We also have one in Taiwan. But going through all of the map, we have to juggle. How equitable is it to invest in certain currencies and such. That sometimes prevents us to place investments. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Hey, thank you. My name is Derek Yoon, and I work for Arju IB Investment. Arju IB Investment is a South Korean venture capital firm headquartered in Seoul, and we total AUM is $1.5 billion US. And we have more than 40 years company history. We are one of top five largest venture funds in Korea, and it was about 4 years ago, 2013, we opened a U.S. operation location in Boston to expand our geographic coverage, investment coverage to especially the biotech or life science in U.S. So we picked Boston, and then I'm the founding member of the U.S. operation. Then right now, oversees the entire U.S. portfolio and new investment projects. And last 4 years, we have invested 13 companies in U.S. and then heavily for all therapeutics and heavily focused on oncology, immuno-oncology, ophthalmology, some anti-infectious disease, or we have also one company doing a drug device combo business products. And not only achieving a good investment returns, we also have a very important mission for us, like bridging good technology here in U.S. to Korean pharma industry in general, because there are not many Korean venture firms are located in the East Coast and really active investment here. So my goal and our company's goal is making investment activities like U.S. investors here, so joining and participating or leading good deals here. Not only that, also we lead very collaboration or global partnership or joint ventures or collaboration for R&D or even licensing in and out opportunities between U.S. biotech industry and the Korean market or Korean farmers. That's my very important mission as well.
So my name is Wei Yousun. I'm Senior Director in Seoul Scientific Affairs of Daiichi Sankyo. Daiichi Sankyo is one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in Japan. And so I have been working for this company for 15 years, 7 years in Japan and 8 years in US. So my group mainly is the searching and evaluation for the Daiichi Sankyo business development. And we focus on the biotech companies in US and Canada, and we make the investment not really for financial return, mainly for the strategic investment. Basically, we only invest in the program that Daiichi Sankyo has interest. And for example, like the therapeutic area in cardiovascular, metabolic, immunology, oncology, pain, those are like our major therapeutic focus. We also interested in the drug delivery technology. Actually today we announced a deal with Prolix, which is a San Francisco-based company. They have the linker technology to extend the half-life of the drugs. And so we basically made so basically we make the deals. Make deals, we make the investment, we try to get the option of asset. So that's our strategy. Thank you.
Well, I've been in biotech a long time, and originally relationship with Japanese companies is when I was an executive at a San Diego biotech company. At the time, we only had about 15 employees and about enough money to last us about less than 3 months. Now, we did $40+ million worth of deals with just Japanese companies, and I was the lead on that. Japan Tobacco, Kubota Corporation. We had other international deals. It was a very different time in the late 1980s of doing business with the Japanese, and they also made investments in us. 12 years later, we were sold to Dow Chemical, for $1.2 billion. So our Japanese investors made between 3 to 4 times on their money. After that, although my name is Kim, I'm a fake Korean. I'm third generation. So when POSCO Steel was looking for somebody to lead their biotech area, they scraped the side of the barrel, the bottom of the barrel. They had to go outside the barrel to find me. I became their chief biotech officer for the Seoul Steel Corporation, and I, along with another Kim, Paul Kim, co-founded a company called POSCO BioVentures. Now, POSCO was not known in the biotech community, but that was one of our objectives. And in 2002, when we founded the company, we looked at over 1,000 companies. We invested in 7. One of them was the deal of the year, which was Infinity Pharmaceuticals. After that investment, where a lot of $500 million VCs could not get into deal, everybody knew us. And that was the beginning of our deal flow. Now, I'm involved with consulting for Japanese companies, trying to find US private companies and the other way around. And we're trying to close on a strategic fund with Asian partners that are just choosing a few strategic LPs and then working with them towards their strategic goals in that fund. So I've been on both sides of the table.
Great, thank you. So each panelist made a few interesting points which I wrote here. So I want to get back to just one of the points for each of the panelists. So starting from Leo. So you started in your career a while ago. I think among us, you obviously have the longest tenure in biotech investment, and you worked at POSCO, which by the way, it's a large Korean conglomerate and very diversified, and they are one of the first Korean conglomerates to start actively directly investing in biotech. So he's the one who's done it. So as far as you know, before and now, before and after, which is now, how has Korean conglomerate and Korean corporate VCs, investors have changed? I mean, you can go on, I think, for a long time and talk about this, but what are some of the most notable sort of transformation that they have gone through? Obviously, the industry in Korea is undergoing a lot of changes in biotech. So maybe if some of your points could be representative of what might be going on in Korea biotech industry.
Yeah, and as you know, biotech has many components. There's the diagnostic, there's the apparatus or devices, and then there's the pharma. Korea, I think, there aren't very super large pharma companies or device companies like in Japan. And I'm familiar with Japan as well. And so finding strategic VCs in Korea, whereas even some of the Japanese companies have their own captive strategic venture capital, Korea generally doesn't. And so the access into the VC community there that's directly associated with a pharma or device company is somewhat limited. And that's very, very different than Japan, where some of the Japanese sensor companies that I've seen in the last couple of years are very sophisticated in their technology. If they invested in a medical device company or digital health company in the United States, they would bring a lot to the table. I mean, a great deal, and they would be almost like a strategic partner to the US side. So that's the contrast that I've seen between Korea and Japan in the last few years.
Great, okay, thank you. And Wei-Yong, so you have stressed that you are a strategic investor, and you're making an investment, obviously, on behalf of Daiichi Sankyo, very strategic. So to the companies who are raising funding from you, and you as the investor, if you are so strategic, do you have any, how do you work with the financial VCs?
So it's very difficult. So basically, we separate into two parts. So one is in our group, basically it's more like the strategy investment part. We really invest in the early stage opportunity or technology that we try to get the option. And the other methodology we have is to sitting as the LP limited partner in other venture capital firms, and in our case, Thomas Weiser Partners and Kearney Venture Partners, same management group based in San Francisco. And for them, it's purely financial return. So basically, we take the limited partner position, just try to get more information on the deal flow.
Okay, great, thank you. And Derek, so you started in 2013 in Boston, and I know you have very actively made a bunch of investments, and you have some IPOs, and which are all very impressive. And you mentioned that in addition to your more sort of traditional VC investing, my impression was that you are also helping with bridging the U.S. companies do something with Korean pharma. Is that like in addition to your VC activities, or is it ingrained into your investment, or can you elaborate that a little?
Because I can, it's two different missions, but I can say it's a really separate thing, because if I do make a good job with by bringing a good technology to Korean farmers, eventually they are more interested in my fund business, and they're going to put their money into my fund as well. So kind of it's a long-term relationship with my Korean farmers. But one thing I have noticed since the last 4 years, when I started in 2013, not many Korean farmers really actively looking for drug assets outside of Korea. They are more than like a generic only business, who are more like a biosimilar focused business. But recently, what happened is, I can see a Korean government has a more strict policy in the drug pricing, even generic drugs. It's very light margins. And also, I know some Korean farmers has like a CEO changes by changing their generation. So son took it over their father's company, and then they gotta do something innovative, something, right? So because of that, I also got connected with several Korean farmers, like owner group, and they come over Boston and ask me, what are you looking for? What types of technology are you doing? And they're more willing to take over, like less risk averse, and then they're more willing to take over all these digital assets. So I see the changes. So my goal is first to make a good return for our investment, from my investment, and also eventually making a good kind of partnership or strategic missions. I doing a great job on the strategic mission, and eventually raising funds from those Korean farmers. So I cannot say it's a completely separate project.
Okay, very good. So you not only make direct investment out of your own fund, but then you also sort of open the doors for
And
the
that is
US
also
companies.
good for my portfolio company, because they
Sure.
can have a global exposure as a venture fund here. They can have a good contact, regional partners in Korea, which they initially had no idea, but through their investors, I can make a good contact there. So it's good for our portfolio companies as well.
Okay, thank you. And James, so slightly different from Wei Young, who emphasized the strategic aspect of his investment. You sort of stressed you're very risk averse.
Yes.
Okay, so so is that, and then you went on to describe specifically what sort of
Yes.
investments you're looking for. Is that because of that, or is it sort of
I think
representative of? You don't have to speak on behalf of like sort of Japan,
Right.
corporate VC as a whole, but like risk averse. Can you put that into sort of
I
context?
think, our CEO wants us to cast a very wide net as to what we will invest in, because we could invest in a company that on its own could grow to the point where it could be its own division within Hoya, right? If it could grow to the point where it would have its own sales and market force, and it could be standalone, siloed in that way. Or we could invest in a company that would either be plug and play within an existing division, or we could invest in something that we just sell to another strategic and exit. With such a wide net, we better get it right. Right, and I think that's his philosophy, is that if we are going to make a lot of bets and we have no real idea of what we're doing because we're so defocused, that would be bad, right? So we either are going to hire an army of consultants to really nail down everything, which will just drive up our costs, or we can just really take the time to learn about each individual deal.
Okay.
And so that's basically the basis of the risk aversion. And I think that our move to being more financially driven, just to invest in things that are med tech in general, that's actually a new development within our group. We used to be just strategic, just a lot like Wei Yong, but I think that's a new development to come out to basically put out new podis and get out there and really find a new division for Hoya.
Okay, excellent. Okay, thanks. So perhaps we maybe take a step back and sort of put things in a more sort of macro perspective. So I mentioned, but then I'm not a panelist, so I'm not really allowed to describe. So a lot has changed in Korean biotech industry, pharmaceutical industry, and Japan. I think obviously Japan was one of the early mover and influencer among the Asian pharma in terms of reaching globally into the to look for deals and M&As and all that. So the investment strategies that you have described, as well as your presence itself, what's driving that changes and your activities? Because if we held Korea, Japan investor panel, say like 5-6 years ago, I don't think most of us would be here. So things have certainly changed. So just to give you some, give the audience some perspective as to what's going on in your respective country. Any comments on that? Anybody?
I think Korea and Japan both has more strong capital capability, especially Korea. Last 20 years, 15 years, even before 15 years ago, we never even not. I was a venture capitalist there, and no one really think about investing outside of Korea at the time. But now we have more capital to invest, and then they like to looking for industry outside of Korea to find a good investment opportunities. So that is a big change. The capital market in Korea is a big change in the last 10 to 15 years.
Is the Korean domestic investment industry, VC industry, becoming obviously very competitive as well?
Right. And also, 15 years ago, I remember more about high-tech based or techie or IT based business were really hot target for, very attractive target for venture capital business, venture capital firms. But I think most of growth momentum and dynamics now move off to China. I think that they are looking for something different other than IT, and then they at some point concluded, biotech is a good industry. We need to really take a look for the next industry sector. And then they also realize that outside of Korea, they know, especially in U.S., there are many good things out there. So they with great more amount of capital, and they're looking for investment opportunity outside of Korea as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Anything to add to either Korea or Japan as to what might be instituting a lot of changes that you see lately, especially early stage investments? Anyone else?
So I think regarding the investment criteria, probably Japan and Korea is using the same criteria as the U.S. VCs, but the Chinese venture capital firms are using different criteria. So that's one difference, right? And I talk about the strategy investment. The good thing to partner with a Japanese company or a Korean-based venture capital, or especially those like the corporate venture capital, is you get those kind of expertise and support, from your venture capital partners. For example, in our case, as one of the big pharma, we have all the capability, regarding whether it is HDR screening or generate antibody or humanized antibody. So if you really have a startup company needs those kind of help, once we make those kind of investments, we also provide those kind of help. So I don't think you can easily get those kind of help from the venture capital firms in China. But on the other hand, I think in a US-based venture capital firm, they also provide good business development and support for you and guide you how to move the company to the next stage. I think the most important thing for a startup company is really you only have limited capital, right? You want to use the limited capital to generate the most necessary data for you to move into the next stage or to exit. So those kind of guidance, either from traditional, US-based famous venture capital, or like the corporate VC, I think, probably they will provide more guidance and help.
So I have a question for you. So your focus obviously is outside of Japan, in US and North America largely. So now that the boundaries of geographical boundaries of innovation is blurring, meaning that a lot of entrepreneurs and VCs in the US, for example, are searching everywhere for early stage assets. Right? The competition for that has become very fierce, and for the fact that Japan has very strong science, right? Like Tokyo University, like Kyoto, Riken, and names go on. How do VCs, US VCs or entrepreneurs reach out to those institutes to find commercialization projects? Is it even feasible, or have you seen anything like that happening in recent years?
Were you talking about US VCs looking for Japanese assets?
Yes, US VCs or entrepreneurs looking for Japanese assets.
Well, yes, and I can also talk about Korean assets.
Yes,
because
yeah,
the reason
sure.
POSCO hired me was POSCO had invested $100 million into Pohon University just in biotech for over 10 years, and they were getting zero return. And so they wanted to have a more commercial bent. Now, U.S. assets investing in China and Japan has really changed, because when there was the NASDAQ, of course, and when the JASTEC formed, the Japan equivalent of the NASDAQ, I actually gave a talk as to the differences. At that time, you had to have dividends. And you'd never ask a U.S. biotech company to give dividends before you could be listed. But things have changed, and I think as you point out, the U.S. investors are realizing the sophistication of the technology in Japan, but perhaps just as important, or more importantly, the executive management resources are impressive in Japan. But Wei-Jong mentioned Korea and Japan and contrasted Korea and Japan to China. I'd like to make another contrast. In the area, the last time BIO was held in San Diego, there was almost a whole day of panels just on an area that a lot of people didn't recognize. It was called digital health. And there it was pointed out in 2012, there was only very small investments, even though it wasn't called digital health. But the projections at that time was by 2020, and I think we're on track. By 2020, it would be $20 billion. So I think of the three countries, Japan, Korea, and China, and actually I attended the Strategic Chinese panel and I asked the question, but the entity that really is on board with digital health is Japan. And the reason is Japan is a critical leader in materials, computers, but most importantly, sensors. You need sensors for digital health. So I think there is a very, very different perspective of the three Asian countries that the Japanese have identified as an investment area. And in fact, many Japanese companies have moved their sensor manufacturing back into Japan from China. So that is, it's a little bit off the subject of your question, but I do feel it's important to note that there are some significant differences between those three countries.
So the long-standing rivalry between Japan or Korea, we would assume that would continue if not getting more severe, because Korea is also, especially among the conglomerates, getting into digital health and imaging and sensor and all those things are pretty
Yes,
you know,
yes.
thought very critical for their long-term life sciences endeavor, right? Okay, all right. Okay, great. So all of you are in the U.S. and most of you are working on behalf of your your corporate headquarters in Japan and in Korea. So how, it's just, probably curious. So how do you do that? Like, so do you guys like travel all the time, or do your colleagues come here, or do you have like conference call at like 2 a.m. in the morning? Or?
Yes. Yes, I was.
a little bit.
So in my experience, my boss, he had been coming to the United States probably 3 weeks out of every month for the past 5 years, and they didn't have anybody in the United States working on behalf of his group. So they brought me on to help, relieve some of that need for him to travel. And of course, I think he still travels that much. We just do more. And for me, I try to be available on their schedule. So it's a lot of calls, a lot of conference calls up until about 2 a.m. when they would get off work. And I go to Japan, probably at least once or twice a quarter to have meetings with the CEO about our investments that we want to propose. So for me, yeah, I do absolutely travel a lot, adopt their schedule, and we just try to reach out to as many companies as we possibly can and do a lot of due diligence.
And if you could add, so in order for a company here to raise funding from you guys,
Yeah.
do they have to add, as things progress, hopefully, do they have to go present at Japan or Korea?
No, we typically don't ask them. We will go visit them at their headquarters. So wherever they're at, if they're in Colorado or Miami, or a lot of them are in San Francisco or down here, we'll go there, or Boston or wherever they're at, and we'll see them, and we'll see their lab and their facilities if they're not virtual, and then we'll go from there. Yeah, right. So we almost always go to them.
How about you, Derek?
Yeah, I do have a conference call over the night, but not 2 a.m. Because I'm based in Boston, so Eastern time wise, more like a 9 p.m. conference call in Korea. So it's not that bad. But the purpose of the call is we have investment committee in our headquarters in Seoul. So when we make an investment decision with the new deals, we have a long 2 hours conference call. I explain about the new company, and then I will share my due diligence process. So through this investment committee call, we make an investment decision. Also, once we make an investment, every quarter we have a portfolio review. So we give our investment committee do updates on our each our portfolio companies. That's how we manage our portfolio. But that is more about our purpose of my conference call. And it was also a very important thing is our investor relationship. So for that, I cannot make a call with my investors. So once a year or twice a year, I visit in Korea to meet our fund investors, have an in-person meeting to give more details of our updates on our portfolio companies. That's mostly how I manage our fund management activity.
So although Daiichi Sankyo has headquarters in Japan, we consider us a global company. So in fact, our global R&D head is American, who came from Novartis, and our global BD head is also American, who came from Amgen. So, but on the other hand, if you are an early stage company, so in order for us to make the investment, we definitely need expertise. So those expertise are mainly in Japan, which means our labs and also our scientists. So like 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern Coast Eastern time, and 8 a.m. Tokyo time. That is the typical in our working hour for me, if not every day, every other day.
So with a strategic fund like the Pusco BioVentures or the fund we're trying to close on, since we have only one or a few limited partners, strategic, we have no problem with their employees being embedded in our offices. And so the communication is rather intimate at that stage. Should there be the necessity of some technology discussions, it could be done by Skype or actual site visits to either the US or to Korea or to Japan.
Great, good, thank you. So we have about 7 minutes left, and we'd like to open up the floor for any questions or comments, or yes, please.
We're a Canadian company, so Canada, very small VC world. We run all the time to America to look for money. Canada is a small country,
It's a huge country.
it's a huge country, small population. But I wonder whether or not there's any opportunity for Canadian companies to talk to Japanese VC firms and Korean VC firms, because we're not American, so we're even more different, It's still.
I met many Canadian companies visiting Boston, our Boston office, and I met many, and even one company I remember was, the company was stock trading, the company stock traded in Toronto Stock Exchange market,
Yeah.
but the trading volume is so low, so they tried to raise US-based capital, and then they tried to listing to the NASDAQ market. So that was the project. So I had experienced actually a couple of Canadian company projects. So
It's possible.
it's open, yeah, definitely.
One of our most recent investment, we seeded a company coming out of one of the universities in Ontario. So we definitely look into Canada, and Toronto and Ontario being our focus area. And there was a project that we look into coming out of University of Toronto, the UHN, University Health Network, and we tested, and then one of the big Boston VC actually ended up investing in that project. So we certainly go there, for sure.
I think the quality of Canadian biotech is high. Your relative numbers of the biotech companies is smaller, but the quality is good. The Canadian government, of course, co-invests in the industry, and the university base that you draw upon is outstanding.
So last year, I brought our lab head and a couple of scientists all the way to University of Manitoba.
Wow.
And we invested in one target there, and so that is we started a collaboration. And the difficult thing is on the weekend I have nothing to do. I have to go to the zoo to see the polar bear.
That's a benefit. Yes.
Better in Churchill.
I'm trying to understand, I'm kind of new at this game. What is actually the minimal size or the minimal kind of operation? Supposing you have a startup with a very promising technology, a game changer theoretically, what point would you consider an investment in such a company?
So how early do we invest, and what might be the investment size when the company is basically being formed out of universities, or what stage of company are you referring to?
I'm thinking about making, no, I'm just kidding. If let's say a preclinical, postclinical, what stage is actually?
Okay.
I mean, I would say, like, for myself, I really like to see human data, and however, we have actually considered, my normal wheelhouse is 2 to 20 million a piece, but we have considered investments as small as 150K.
Okay.
I want to be more opportunistic, so I don't have any restriction or any limit for the types of company we review. But in general, I see most of the company coming to us, they are at the stage of like entering IND, so they are raising funds for their human study. So mostly in 6 months we are filing IND and we are entering the clinical trial, phase 1, so we raising money. That is kind of typical case for us. And also very late stage case, even we invested after having a phase 2A data. So it's a very late stage investment. We also do, even company haven't determined their lead compound at discovery level, we also made an investment, but that is a very early stage investment, so investment size was very small, but we definitely reserve the capital for follow-on investment as well.
So we can do very early stage investment that can be like a very novel target. For example, you have a novel target, you have like transgenic or knockout mice to support to validate those targets. That is already the starting point for us to make the investment. Of course, we also do late stage acquisition like San Diego-based Ambit. Was a public company before we, bought them. At that time, they have like the program, finished phase 2B and then phase 3.
So, as everyone knows, the early stage is the highest risk. So a key component is the strength of the technology. And the worst case is one shot on the goal. You have a single product that you're developing, it's preclinical, that's the highest probability of failure, even though it may turn out to be a successful company. But if you have extremely unique technology and IP and multiple shots on goal, which is typically a platform company, then that's where even some of the larger companies make investments at the preclinical.
So we may possibly have 2 more minutes for one more additional question. If not, yes, please.
So I'm a CRO, I'm representing a CRO company, and there are so many companies, so many startup companies that I talk to. They know they need to get to the R&D enabling studies, but they just really lack of fund. So many companies talk to us saying, could you just do the service in exchange for investment? So I see a huge gap there, like there are so many companies kind of just stop there. And you also mentioned about OneCommon and these new startup companies, there are a lot of them, they're really just OneCommon. So I don't know if they are strategic thinking of filling that gap. And as a CRO, we cannot just do that kind of service because because this is not our main focus to invest in the company. And for me, I feel like the lack of opportunity because of the funding, and these companies just die down, and it's kind of someone needs to pick that up.
Well, I'd like to raise a very interesting example of a single shot on goal. And the company that ended up successful from it is now the second or third largest biotech company in the world, Celgene.
Yeah.
Celgene had only one shot on goal. They developed a compound that caused teratogenic results in pregnant women, and so it was ignored for 40 years. And they turned it into a cancer product, and that was the beginning of Celgene. So there are exceptions to the rule of one shot on goal, and who would choose a teratogenic compound as that one shot? Well, Celgene did. So there are exceptions, and it all gets back to diligence and your vision.
There are always, despite what seems to be a thriving investment community, there are always more companies trying to raise money than the available investors, and that also is an issue in Korea where crossing the chasm, it's a term coined in technology. A lot of companies fail to cross that chasm, even though supposedly there is a bunch of VC money available in Korea. So it's a perpetually existing sort of hardship that a lot of startups go through. But to his point,
but to echo your sentiments, I mean, I was told by BD people in Boston that there's a lot of new interest in Asia for early stage companies in the oncology therapeutic space. But when you sit down and you start talking, they start pushing later. They really want to see the human data. They want to see the clinical trials. And so it is tough to be preclinical and have a novel target and jump that gap. Everyone wants to do it, but then I think you guys have to face the fact that it's a lot easier to maybe just go after another PLD1 antibody, and there's less risk there because everyone else is doing it. But it is a tough.
I'm waiting for one successful case, like someone, any Asian company out of Korea, Japan, China, just make a very risky investment and then make a big win. I think you're gonna see many followers afterwards.
I
I'm
agree.
really hoping to see this.
I agree. I think that, I think it's, yes, I agree that that's what everyone's waiting for, yeah.
I'll put my company forward.
Oh,
All right, so this will be the end, and so hope you had a great conference and have a nice rest of the week for other additional meetings. Thank you very much. Thank you.